So outsourcing, the who should do it decision. So this means we're not doing it, and we might not do it because, one, we don't have the capability, or we don't have the expertise, or we just don't want to do it, or we don't have the equipment. So basically, we're not going to do the work, so we're going to give it to someone else to do for us. So reasons companies outsource. So the biggest one is to reduce cost. It could be also to free up resources, focus on their core competencies, or accelerate a reorganization, gain access to the expertise, and increase speed to market. So if you go to a company that specializes in that function that you need done, they have the expertise to get it done. And if they're a company that other companies go to for that particular work, they have the expertise, right? So that gain access to expertise is great. For example, you need a lawyer because you got a speeding ticket. Well, you don't have that expertise to go before a traffic court or whatnot and try to get a prayer for judgment or whatever it's called in your area to get the ticket thrown out or minimized to a point where you just don't have any points on your license. You might have to pay a fine, but you don't have any points on your license, so therefore your insurance won't go up. Well, you need that you need to gain access to expertise, so you will probably get a whole bunch of letters from lawyers in your mailbox, and you can go through those and then contact the lawyer and say, I need your help. So, that's just one aspect. Now, some companies are doing so much that they don't have resources. For example, if you outsource your call centers, maybe the company is small, but they can't afford to have 300 people answering phones because 300 might be 3 times the size of the company. Well, instead of having your own people answering phones to do troubleshooting and technical support and customer service, you can free up those people, those resources, and give it to somebody else who has the expertise so you can focus on your core work. And it might be cheaper to do that than paying somebody else as a W-2 employee when you can pay for the service through another company. So there's a lot of reasons to outsource. So what are some options you need to consider? Well, outsourcing, usually it's to eliminate, to get rid of the activity, or to automate. Substitute machines for people is one. But you really need to start looking at this decision early because it will improve the quality of your decision. So think about it. If you want to eliminate the cost of having a call center, well, that's something you can outsource. And there's companies that will do it, no problem for you. And then you can automate some work. For example, there's some lawyers that will outsource some of the work, some low-level work that's just to the Philippines. There's some people over there that will do the work for very low cost. And lawyers use them. Nothing wrong with that. The lawyer actually does review the work and make sure it's done right. But that means that lawyer was freed up to do other work. So instead of using machines, they can automate the work process by just having someone else do it. So you got to consider these things early. So if someone says, hey, let's outsource this, go ahead and start evaluating it. Don't just say, oh, no, we're not going to outsource it. But actually look into it. It might actually be something that's worth it. So who are the decision makers? So when we look at it, top management, of course, they are the final decision makers. They usually they will define the decision criteria and provide feedback when various options are analyzed. Finance, because that's going to impact the profit and loss statement. And they're also looking at, the future costs. What about the impacted functions? So if you're outsourcing marketing, for example, and you have a couple people in marketing, well, is that something that you need to consider? What about your sales team? Sales and marketing usually work pretty closely. So how are you going to look at that? What about purchasing? Well, if you're purchasing this stuff, we need to look at that make versus buy decision. Is it more economical? Is there savings by taking it outsourced versus insourcing it? What about all the support you might have to give for an in-house marketing team versus an outsourced marketing team? If it's an internal marketing team, you might have to buy special equipment. If they make videos, you might need a video camera and all this other stuff. But if you outsource it, the outsourcing company should have all that already, so they won't bill you for that. So, what about suppliers? They need to be aware that you are outsourcing a certain function, because if they get a call from somebody and they say, "Oh, I'm from ABC Outsourcing Company on behalf of," and your company name, well, your supplier might be like, "Well, who are you?" But your suppliers can also provide that insight to work up that analysis. They may know some companies that do work in that area, and they say, "Hey, we've done business with these companies. You may want to consider these companies because we've worked well with them in the past." Now, when I say suppliers, you can also think of maybe other people that are in your industry. Because if you're outsourcing something and other companies have done it, you may want to reach out and say, "Hey, we're considering outsourcing our call center. And we know you guys did that a year ago. What were some things that you guys thought about, or who did you look at?" And if you're doing that in, let's say, an industry association meeting, most of the time those people are willing to let you know the details. Now, they won't tell you everything because they need to keep their competitive advantage, but they'll give you some information to consider. And then, of course, we have our consultants. These consultants usually possess expertise, specialized expertise, and they can guide the process, or they can make the decision depending on how much authority you give these consultants. But usually when consultants are involved, top management is also involved, because the consultants will give their recommendation to top management and then a decision will be made. So these are just some decision makers. Some people have more power than others. Some people don't have any power, but everything is impacted when it comes to this. So we have Porsche's value creation. So they evaluated whether to make versus buy two models of their cars. Well, they looked at it, and the value they can gain is 20% internally for the 911 model, or the 80% externally. If they make 20% of the parts internally and externally do 80%, that could be a winning combination. So we have to look at more than just all or nothing. What if we do partial work? We do some internal and some external. So we need to analyze and figure this stuff out, right? So what are some pitfalls? Because outsourcing is not a perfect opportunity. And you can't outsource everything, but some people don't understand that. So we have some pitfalls. There is no formal outsourcing process. It's kind of, you get the information and you make a decision. But what information to get, what other information to disregard, there's no formal process to do that. There's suggestions, but there's no actual black and white process for it. And you're going to kind of hollow out the company. If you're going to outsource your sales team, well, you might have, 20 people gone because of outsourcing. Well, that's not good. The rest of the company is going to start thinking, well, what area is getting outsourced next? And that it's going to have people be very hesitant within your company. So you have to communicate to your teams. And most of the time, there's an inaccurate cost analysis because you don't factor in all the expenses that might occur. So outsourcing might be a fee for service or an a la carte type fee structure. A la carte meaning you pay for what you use. And sometimes you think you know what you're going to use, but it turns out to be more. Or you have a fee for service, but the fee turns out to be much more because you underestimated the amount of service you would need. So be careful on the cost analysis. It's better to analyze high than to analyze low, because it's a lot easier to say, oh, we overestimated. We're going to, we allocated $1 million for this, but we're only going to spend $900,000. That's a lot better than to say, oh, we allocated $1 million, but now it's $1.2 million in cost. So one management's going to be happy. The other one management's not going to be happy. And one of the things when you outsource, you usually tell the outsourcing company how you want certain things done. And generally they're poorly documented because people just know how they're done and they do it. But it's usually not written down. So how can an outsourcing company do it the way you want it done if it's poorly documented or poorly written out for them if it's given to them? And another thing is kind of going with the hollowing out the company is your people will be resistant to change, and the decision makers overlook that. So you have to keep your people informed and involved to the extent of their positions. That way, when it actually happens, they understand why it's happening and how it's going to benefit the company, and they support the decision. So getting them on board with the decision early is going to be so much better. So under what circumstances would you look for these errors? Would you look before, afterwards, when something actually happens? How would you do it? So this is the who should do it decision. And as you see, there's a lot of things to consider. So don't be shy and ask questions when this process is going on, because you might think of one thing and somebody else might not even think of that. But because you brought it up, now they're going to think about it. So definitely get involved and don't sit there quiet like a church mouse. Speak up and make sure everything's considered. So that was the who should do it decision. So let's move on to the offshoring aspect, the where should it be done decision in our next video.